this week's drive, we take a slide on the wild side, scratch some paint, crash, but without falling down, and do what comes unnaturally. All this and more in this week's Drive. We start with two milestones. The Brazilian Grand Prix was the 700th Formula One race and was Jordan's 200th start. This is their 1991 car, which gave Michael Schumacher his first Formula One start at the Belgian race at Spa.
I think if someone was to ask me what was the biggest achievement, it's probably surviving the first year, not necessarily the results. So the objectives were at the time, see how we could get on. Of course, you go into these things quite blind. You think you're going to win the first race, you think, but you don't say it to anyone, and you think you're going to do well. And then you realise how professional and how tough it really, really is.
Schumacher stood in for Bertrand Gachot in jail after an argument with a London cab driver. The other driver that first year was Andrea de Cesaris, who returned as a stand-in 1994 before retiring to become a currency trader. Jordan himself was originally a merchant banker. The team's first Grand Prix win came in 1998 with Damon Hill from teammate Ralf Schumacher, also at Spa. The next year, Heinz-Harald Frentzen won the Italian and French races. Jordan has twice been third in the Constructors' Championships. Last year was an unhappy one, but Eddie remains focused.
But we do need to get back into being on the podium, fighting for pole position, and particularly winning races, which is what we were able to do. Right at this moment, it seems like a daunting exercise to think about that. But if you don't think about it, and if you don't plan for it, if you don't crave for it, then you're not going to achieve it. And we certainly crave for it here. We will win races again.
And Fisichello's brilliant drive in Brazil bodes well for the revival of Jordan this year. Williams driver Juan Pablo Montoya took part in a karting demonstration during the run-up to the Brazilian Grand Prix. The Williams team has a new aerodynamic package and had high hopes going into the third round, but the controversial rain-lashed, crash-shortened race saw Montoya out after 24 laps and his teammate Ralf Schumacher finish a lonely ninth. We'll have to wait for the first European round, the San Marino Grand Prix at Imola in Italy, to see if the Williams engineers have got a winning package. As one of South America's premier drivers, alongside Brazilians Rubens Barrichello and Cristiano da Mata, Montoya was in great demand before the race and attended a charity event where he met the designer of the helmet he wore during the race. Olivia Vasquez was chosen from hundreds of students who entered a competition to design a new look for the driver's all-important helmet. Montoya was asked what he thought about the controversial hands, the head and neck support system, which is now mandatory in top-class racing.
When they told me that in Formula One we had to use hands, I was the person who was opposed to it the most, because I had used it in the United States and it was a little bit uncomfortable. When they told me I had to use it in Formula One, I said it's going to be a real headache. And I think that Williams designed about 5 or 6 hands. And then an American company came and designed 4 until one of them worked. And now I don't feel it.
The winning entry is inspired by Colombian folklore and prominently displays 2 flames, signifying power. Olivia, who's from Bogotá, flew to see her idol race in Sao Paulo in Brazil. Afterwards, Montoya provided autographs for his young fans. And sadly, the helmet didn't give Juan Pablo any extra luck. He crashed out on lap 24. Jean Todt, Ferrari's team director and the man credited with making the team #1 in Formula One, described Ferrari's relatively poor performances in 2003 as unexpected and disappointing, but he denied that they were losing ground to their rivals.
Definitely considering the standard we had the previous years and mainly in 2002, it was some disappointment because ending with only one podium with Rubens in Malaysia finishing second is not what we were expecting.
Ferrari finished off the podium for the first time in 54 races at the season's opener in Melbourne and haven't been back on it since. The next round is at Imola, Ferrari's home Grand Prix. Like last year, the team will debut a new car there.
We know it will be a tough race. It will be a tough race because the weather conditions are not playing in our favor. And even last year with the introduction of the new car, it was not an easy race for Michael, who won. So we are expecting to fight quite a lot.
The team's fanatically loyal fans are sure to turn out in their thousands, all urging the red cars of Michael Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello on to victory. Last year, the pair scored a comfortable 1-2 victory, with Rubens 18 seconds behind Michael and 2 seconds ahead of Ralf Schumacher. Keen to regain winning form, Schumacher has been hard at work developing the new car, pounding around the factory's private track, trying out various settings and components, and putting full race distances on the new car before it races for the first time. Going to Imola, Raikkonen and Coulthard are still on top, but Fisichella's win on appeal jumps him up to 4th, with the reigning champion and his teammate sharing 6th place. This early in the season, the Manufacturers' Championship is looking like a McLaren benefit, Ferrari neck and neck with Williams, and both of them behind Renault. The NASCAR Series headed for a 500-mile, 334-lap race in Fort Worth, Texas. On lap 43, Steve Park's car got loose and spun, which created a lot of smoke. He spun across the grass onto the pit road, remarkably without hitting anyone or anything. The same thing happened on lap 169 to Elliott Sadler. He also spun out, but he hit the inside wall, crumpling his car's front end. He'd led for 91 laps, but the M&M's driver was headed for an early shower and the first flight home.
Mike Elliott Sadler. A little bit tight, the 2-car out as well.
Jimmy Spencer crashed hard into the outside wall with 109 laps left in the race. 46-year-old Spencer's car ended up stopped on the racetrack, pointing in the wrong direction. Failing to score drops him to 30th place in the championship. 9 laps later, Steve Park was back in the wars. He spun again, and this time his car was tagged by Mike Skinner's number 4 car, which then rammed the inside wall. This brought out the 7th caution flag of the race and bunched up the field.
You know this, sometimes you have to make a little chassis adjustment with 2 right-side tires, because that will actually automatically tighten the race car up.
Then, with just 84 laps left, Bobby Labonte crashed into the inside wall. The caution laps came on for the 4th time in 25 laps, and it was the 9th caution period of the day.
2:51 in the last 25 laps. We've had 4 caution flags, and nobody gets a lap back.
Ryan Newman held off the field to record his 2nd career win. He only led for 77 laps, but did so when it counted most, as he won the Samsung Radio Shack 500. Newman won by just 3.4 seconds, about half the length of the straight on the track at the Texas Motor Speedway. He was the 7th different race winner this season and moves from 15th to 8th in the championship. On to 2 wheels now, where a legendary bike maker was preparing for its much-anticipated debut in MotoGP at the Japanese Grand Prix, after more than a decade of domination in the World Superbike Series. Ducati is best known for its exotic road bikes and winning Superbike titles, but has thrown its efforts at the MotoGP Series this season with Loris Capirossi and Troy Bayliss.
I like very much the track, and this is, especially the first race, is for us is very important. And we have in Japan, and we have many big factories in Japan, and for us it's very important to do our best.
Joining Capirossi will be Ducati's former Superbike champion, Troy Bayliss. Despite years of experience in Superbikes, the 34-year-old Australian made his debut in Grand Prix racing at Suzuka. He's never raced at the track, arguably the most difficult circuit in MotoGP.
I just go there and do, you know, I've been riding bikes for a long time and it comes sort of naturally. There will be some places I'll go for a walk around and have a look, and I just ease my way in and try not to rush it too much, and it'll all come. The better we prepare ourselves now with basic setup for the bike, the easier it will be for us when we get to the new tracks.
Heading the Ducati team is Livio Suppo, who, like Bayliss, has made the transition from superbikes and has never been involved in MotoGP. Early testing has revealed that the 990cc four-stroke Ducati will be competitive against the Hondas and Yamahas, but Suppo is talking down the team's chances of stealing an early victory at Suzuka.
Probably is the most difficult Grand Prix of the season, and maybe it's good because it's better to start with the most difficult and then maybe it will be better. But again, we can't wait to go there and win. This is not our goal. We want to just go there and learn.
Capirossi, who turned 30 2 days before the race, may have found his spiritual home after signing with the hometown team. It's the first time he's raced a bike from his own country, and in Japan, that adores Italian motorcycles. The countdown to the 2003 MotoGP season began in cold and sometimes wet conditions in Japan. The organisers and various squads have been spending their first days in Japan unpacking the flight boxes and the kit which will allow them to compete during the week that they're in the Far East. Since the curtain fell on last season at Valencia in November, this has been one of the busiest winter periods ever for the teams in the MotoGP World Championship, and riders were keen to get on with unofficial practice. The stage was set when Sete Gibernau posted the fastest time after just 4 laps in the morning. Rossi promptly destroyed Gibernau's early record, setting his fastest laps before lunch, lapping under his own pole position mark from last year. But he had no illusions about the race.
I'm happy. I'm happy because we make a good work, have a good feeling with the bike, but we discover what we already know. This year will be very difficult. Also today I have 15 riders in 1 second. The race for sure will be a hard battle for everybody.
The afternoon session saw the weather deteriorate and track temperatures drop, making faster times increasingly difficult. The rest of the day saw riders trying to put their 2 days' work into practice as they set out to see how fast they could lap the near 6-kilometre circuit. With soft compound tyres fitted for the last few minutes, there were constant changes in the order. Max Biaggi eventually set the 3rd fastest time behind his arch-rival Rossi and teammate Toru Okawa, all 3 riding almost identical Hondas. Makoto Tamada led the provisional 2nd row for Honda, finishing ahead of Suzuki's Kenny Roberts and Yamaha rider Alex Barros. World Superbike champion Colin Edwards could only manage 9th. By the end of the session, Rossi stayed on top of the log. After winning the 250cc title last year, Marco Melandri had high hopes for his first year in the Premier class, but the 20-year-old's season got off to a worst possible start as he slid off his bike at a fast right-hand bend. His Yamaha team looked on in horror as marshals tended to Melandri, who'd only completed 8 laps of the practice session. Suffering breaks to his right ankle, leg and nose, the Italian was taken to hospital by helicopter for surgery. He was fully conscious throughout, and according to the official medical team, he could be fit in time to make his MotoGP debut at the Spanish Grand Prix on May the 11th. But weather conditions weren't getting better, although it was business as usual for Valentino Rossi. The multiple world champion took it easy in the slippery conditions as he set the quickest time, well off the pace of the previous day. The 24-year-old Italian was aiming to maintain his stranglehold at Suzuka. He's won here for the last 2 years. Biaggi was 0.2 of a second quicker than his Camel Pramac Honda teammate Toru Okawa, who went 3rd. Thanks to the conditions, most other positions remained the same, with Makoto Tamada heading the 2nd row. Spanish rider Carlos Checa grabbed the final spot on the provisional front row, the only one to be filled by a Yamaha. Sete Gibernau stayed 6th. But Rossi seemed set to maintain his dominance in MotoGP. Last year, he won 11 out of 16 rounds.
Today, the condition is for nothing because don't rain, but it's not dry. So go on the track is for nothing because you don't test the setting for the dry, and also you don't test the setting for the wet. We're waiting for tomorrow, and anyway, I'm lucky for today because this morning was first position on the wet. But anyway, for tomorrow I prefer dry condition.
In the 250cc category, Japanese rider Hiroshi Aoyama made his local knowledge count in even wetter conditions, topping the timesheets aboard his Honda. He took pole position, having set the fastest time on Friday. Next fastest was another local wildcard entry, Katsuyuki Nagasuga on a Yamaha, who couldn't match the sub 2-minute 18-second time. Spain's Alex de Bon was the first of the regular World Championship contenders and third on the grid. Italy's Roberto Rolfo made up the front row, hundredths of a second behind in the wet, but 2 seconds off the pace in the dry. Spain's Tony Elias crashed his Aprilia heavily late in Saturday's wet session. He walked away from the accident and appeared to be unhurt. Former 125 world champ Manuel Poggiali of San Marino also dumped his Aprilia, losing the front end and sliding heavily into the barriers. He would start his first 250cc race from 23rd place on the grid, but was fastest in Saturday's practice. The grid was settled on Friday's times, unusually the 2 front rows spanning over 4 seconds. In the 125cc class, another San Marino youngster, Alex De Angelis, took provisional pole as rain caused the session to be halted 10 minutes early. 17-year-old Spanish rider Daniel Pedrosa was second on the grid. Italian veteran Lucio Cecchinello is twice the age of Pedrosa and qualified a second slower. Mirko Giansanti was just a 10th slower, also on an Aprilia. There was only one Honda in the top 7 qualifiers. Despite the conditions, the 125s were 2 seconds quicker than the 250s, but race day was expected to be dry but cold and windy, making tyre choices critical. Sure enough, the premier MotoGP event started in cool, windy sunshine. Loris Capirossi grabbed an immediate lead for Ducati from Biaggi and Rossi in an Italian triumvirate. It was a brilliant start to the Italian manufacturer's first Grand Prix in 30 years, and Bayliss had the second Ducati in 5th place. Daijiro Kato crashed his Honda on the second lap on the approach to a chicane. He lay unconscious on the track as marshals rushed to help him, warn other riders and clear debris from the circuit. Medics restarted his heart before he was airlifted to hospital with severe head, neck and chest injuries. It wasn't immediately obvious what had caused the crash, which occurred in a braking area where the bikes would be doing about 200 kilometers an hour. Although his condition improved slightly in the days after the crash, the 250cc world champion of 2001 remains gravely ill. 3 laps later, Biaggi's teammate Toru Okawa made a desperate effort to pass the Ducati of Troy Bayliss, and it was a classic case of racer's red mist, as the Japanese ace drifted wide, left the track and fought to slow down before headbutting the barrier. On lap 5, Rossi made his move on race leader Capirossi, with Biaggi following through to claim second and put the Ducati back to a still creditable 3rd place. With Rossi sliding his bike for the crowd and pulling away, Max was left to consider that, had he won, he would have overtaken Australian Mick Doohan as the all-time leading points scorer in Grand Prix racing, a record which will have to wait for another day. Capirossi, who jumped to an early lead after starting from 15th on the grid, finished 3rd. Rossi, who opened a huge lead from the 8th lap, has now won an incredible 51 of the 109 Grand Prix he has contested in the Premier League of 500cc and now MotoGP.
At the beginning we fight, have a good fight with Biaggi and Capirossi. After I try to go, have hard wind, so it's difficult to ride, but anyway it's possible, and win for Honda here is always special, winning in Suzuki is always special, and the 25 points for the championship are very important. Thank you very much.
Capirossi and Bayliss gave Ducati a good showing, as did reigning World Superbike champion Colin Edwards on his and Aprilia's MotoGP debut, coming 6th. In the 250s, Manuel Poggiali came from 23rd place on the grid after his practice crash to claim victory. Poggiali picked his way through the field in windy conditions, using the skills he learned in winning the World 125cc Championship back in 2001. The 20-year-old took the lead on the 12th of 19 laps to win by 1.3 seconds. But Australian Anthony West paid the price for pushing too hard as he skidded off with 4 laps to go, having stormed from the 5th row of the grid to 2nd place behind Poggiali. Poggiali became the first rider to win his 250cc debut since American Jim Felice in 1988. Wildcard Hiroshi Aoyama, who started from pole position, finished 2nd, with Yuki Takahashi in 3rd. Poggiali's win for Aprilia denied Honda another win at their home race. Katja Punzgen, the only woman racing, was classified 20th and last a lap down, but ahead of the 10 riders who failed to finish. In the 125cc class, Italian Stefano Perugini led an Aprilia sweep of the podium after a dramatic finish. San Marino rider Alex De Angelis had started on pole, but the Aprilia rider crashed out on the 6th lap after colliding with Italian Andrea Dovizio, who went on to finish 5th. Lucio Cecchinello was lucky to get away with this collision with Perugini on the final lap of 18, as his lightweight machine spears onto the slick grass. Trying to recover, Cecchinello then dived off the track under brakes and bypassed the final chicane, lucky not to crash in the gravel trap. He crossed the finish line first, but slowing with his hand raised to acknowledge that this wasn't his rightful place. He was initially placed 8th, leaving fellow Italian Mirko Giansanti runner-up ahead of German Steve Jenkner, but Cecchinello was later promoted to 4th. Daniel Pedrosa was 8th, 23 seconds off the winner's pace. The world's best freestyle snowmobilers took the progression of extreme snowmobiling to the illogical extreme at the Red Bull Fuel and Fury in Jackson, Wyoming in USA. 12 riders from the worlds of snowmobiling, motocross, snowboarding and skiing delighted the crowd by launching huge airs and incredibly technical tricks on their 100-pound snowmobiles off 2 12-foot high ramps. Each rider was allowed just 1 jump per round, and through a total of 4 rounds, with each run judged on style and difficulty. Freestyle snowmobilers use custom hand grips for technical grabs and releases, and have specially modified suspensions to absorb the punishing landings. Heath Frisbee from Baldwell, Idaho, stayed on his machine to claim 2nd place. But it was 1st place finisher Jay Quinlan who utterly stole the show. The Breckenridge, Colorado native flawlessly pulled off the first ever successful backflip in a snowmobile competition off an 85-degree angled ramp, setting the fans into a near frenzy. Watch that again as Jay hangs underneath his peak machine.
I'm stoked to be here right now and just trained really hard doing flips the last 3 months, and I was happy to bring it here and just show people the progression of snowmobiling and where it's going, because these guys are going to be out there next doing them for sure.
Quinlan took home a check for $5,000 US for winning what must be the most bizarre motorsport on Earth. But whether you're splashing in the mud or bouncing off the walls, so you stay on track and up to speed, make sure you catch next week's Drive.